On the evening of December 1, 2017, a man sat across from investigators in a small interrogation room in Jacksonville, North Carolina. For 4 days, he had maintained his innocence. For 4 days, he had told detectives he had no idea what happened to the 3-year-old girl who had vanished from her bedroom. For 4 days, search teams had combed through woods, dragged rivers, and sifted through nearly 100,000 pounds of trash, desperately searching for any sign of life. But now, in the dim light of that interview room, with his mother waiting outside and the weight of a failed polygraph hanging over him, Earl Kimrey finally spoke the words that would shatter a family and expose a truth so disturbing that even seasoned investigators would struggle to comprehend it. "She's in the water," he said quietly. "Shaw Highway. In Begal. I put her there." The little girl he was talking about was Mariah Woods. She was 3 years old. She had brown hair that fell past her shoulders and bright blue eyes that her mother said could light up a room. She was the child who would dance when music played, who laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them, who insisted on wearing her favorite pink pajamas almost every night. She was goofy and talkative, the kind of little girl who could turn a trip to the grocery store into an adventure. She loved to laugh. She trusted easily. She called Earl Kimrey Daddy. And on the morning of November 27, 2017, she disappeared from her home without a trace, those favorite pink pajamas left lying on the floor beside her empty bed. What happened to Mariah Woods in the hours before she vanished? Why did a man she trusted as a father figure drive her tiny body 22 miles in the dead of night and sink it beneath 18 feet of cold, dark water? And what series of lies, contradictions, and chilling purchases would ultimately unravel his story and lead investigators to the most heartbreaking discovery imaginable? This is the full story of Mariah Woods, a case that began with a frantic 911 call, evolved into one of the largest search operations in North Carolina history, and ended with a confession that revealed not just a murder, but a calculated act of cruelty that shook an entire community to its core. If you're drawn to cases like this, stories that need to be told, investigated, and never forgotten, then you're exactly where you need to be. Cold Case Beacon brings you detailed, thoroughly researched true crime documentaries. We follow the facts and the evidence, no matter where it leads. Consider subscribing so you never miss a case, and if this story grips you the way it did me, let me know in the comments. Now, let's begin. Mariah Kay Woods was born into a complicated world. Her mother, Christy Woods, had 2 sons from a previous relationship with a man named Alex Woods. By the time Mariah came into the world, Christy and Alex had separated. Christy had full custody of the children, and Alex had limited visitation rights. The relationship between them was strained. Court documents filed in the summer of 2016 show that Alex Woods had raised concerns about the safety of his children in Christy's care, though no action had been taken at the time. Christy had moved on. She was now in a relationship with a man named Earl Kimrey. Kimrey had moved to Onslow County from the small town of Beulahville to find work. He was separated from his wife, with whom he had a young daughter, though he had not finalized a divorce. He had begun living with Christy Woods and her 3 children in a mobile home located at 2405 Dawson Cabin Road, Lot 7, in a quiet trailer park on the outskirts of Jacksonville. The home sat parallel to the main road, tucked back among other mobile homes and patches of wooded land. It was the kind of neighborhood where people kept to themselves, where children played in small yards, where everyone knew everyone but not everyone was friendly. Mariah had been living in that home for approximately 6 months by the fall of 2017. Despite being diagnosed with a form of muscular dystrophy, a condition that affected her muscles and made walking difficult without assistance, she was full of life. Her family described her as their little comedian. She had an infectious giggle and a personality that could brighten even the hardest days. She would make up silly songs. She loved being the center of attention. And she had a remarkable ability to make people smile, even strangers. Her mother called her their little angel. She said she had felt pregnant with Mariah even though her tubes had been tied and burned after the birth of her sons. Mariah, she said, was a miracle. A gift. The kind of child who reminded you why life was worth living. Earl Kimry had known Mariah since she was 9 months old. He had been present for much of her short life. And according to both Kimry and Christy Woods, Mariah had grown to trust him completely. She called him Daddy. He called her by a nickname, Sissy. To anyone on the outside looking in, they seemed like a blended family trying to make it work. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to show. Christy Woods would later tell investigators that Earl Kimry struggled with anger. She described incidents where he had lost his temper and destroyed property, breaking a microwave, smashing a coffee pot, shattering windows in both the mobile home and their van. On at least one occasion, the outburst had been severe enough that Kimry voluntarily went to a hospital for help. Despite these episodes, Christy maintained that Kimry had never been violent toward the children. That he had a good relationship with them. That Mariah, in particular, seemed to trust him completely. But those who knew the family would later question whether the anger Christy described might have been directed at more than just inanimate objects. By November of 2017, Mariah had been living in that mobile home on Dawson Cabin Road for half a year. She slept in her own small bedroom, a room with a single mattress placed on the floor in the corner. Her 2 brothers slept separately. The older boy had his own room. The younger boy often slept with his mother. And Earl Kimry? He slept in the same bed as Christy Woods. He was, by all accounts, the father figure in that home. On the weekend of November 25th and 26th, 2017, the family took a trip to the town of Richlands, about 20 miles west of Jacksonville, to visit Earl Kimry's mother, Debbie Kimry. It was a short visit, nothing out of the ordinary. The children played. The adults talked. It seemed like a normal family weekend. On the afternoon of Sunday, November 26th, they began the drive back home. Along the way, they stopped at a Walmart near the town of Begaw to pick up groceries for dinner. Security footage from that Walmart would later confirm the family's presence there around 5 or 5:30 in the evening. Christy Woods, Earl Kimry, and the 3 children were all seen on camera. Mariah was with them. She was alive. She was walking, slowly, with difficulty due to her condition, but she was there. She was present. She was real. They left the Walmart and continued the drive home. They arrived at their residence on Dawson Cabin Road around 6:30 in the evening. Kimry and the oldest boy unloaded the van. Christy Woods prepared dinner, pizza for the children. The family ate together. The house was quiet. By 7 o'clock that evening, Christy began getting the children ready for bed. Mariah was dressed in her favorite pink onesie pajama set and pink and white underwear. She was placed in her small bedroom, on the mattress in the corner. The 2 boys were also put to bed. Christy Woods would later tell investigators that everyone in the home was asleep by 8:30 that night. But Earl Kimry told a different story. According to him, while everyone else went to bed, he stayed up. He sat in the living room, in a recliner, and played video games. He claimed he stayed up late into the night, well past midnight. And it was during those late hours, he would claim, that he left the house. Not once. But twice. According to Kimry's initial statements to law enforcement, he left the mobile home sometime around 11 o'clock on the night of November 26th. He drove to a Friendly Mart convenience store on Dawson Cabin Road. Surveillance footage from that store would later confirm this. Kimry's van was seen pulling into the parking lot at 11:56 p.m. He entered the store, walked around briefly, and left without purchasing anything. He was inside for approximately 1 minute. Kimry claimed he then drove to an abandoned house on High Hill Road, a rural, wooded road less than 1/10 of a mile from his own residence. The house, he said, had been vacant for some time. He had discovered it weeks earlier and had been breaking in periodically to steal furniture, dressers, chairs, whatever he could fit into his van, so that he could sell the items and make money. He said he needed the money to pay an overdue electric bill. On the night of November 26th, Kimry claimed he drove to that abandoned house, backed his van up to the property, and loaded 2 dressers into the back of the vehicle. He secured the drawers with straps to keep them from sliding open during transport. He spent about 30 minutes there, then drove back to his residence, arriving around midnight or shortly after. He claimed he then sat back down in his recliner and continued playing video games for another hour or 2. And then he left the house again. This second trip, he said, also took him to the abandoned house on High Hill Road. But this time, he claimed, he did not take the van. He walked. He was nervous about backing the van into a ditch again, so he decided to go on foot. He spent some time at the abandoned house, though his account of what he did there would vary, and then walked back home, arriving around 3 or 3:30 in the morning. When he returned to the mobile home, he said, the front door was locked. He sat down in the recliner again and continued playing video games. He may have dozed off at some point. And then, he said, the alarm went off around 6:12 in the morning to wake the boys for school. That was when, according to Earl Kimry, he discovered that Mariah Woods was missing. At 6:40 in the morning on November 27, 2017, Earl Kimry placed a 911 call. The recording of that call would later be released to the public, and it provides a chilling glimpse into the moments immediately after Mariah's disappearance was reported. The dispatcher asked standard questions. What is your emergency? What is your address? When did you last see her? Kimry's responses were calm. Almost too calm. He explained that everyone had gone to bed around 8 or 8:30 the night before. That when he woke up the boys for school, he noticed Mariah was not in her room. That they had searched the house multiple times, under beds, in closets, throughout the yard. That it was not like her to wander off, especially not at night or in the early morning. The dispatcher asked what Mariah was wearing. Kimry said she had been put to bed in pink pajamas. But then he added something significant. The pajamas she had been wearing were now lying on the floor next to her bed. She was no longer in them. The dispatcher asked if there were any signs of forced entry. Kimry said no. The back door had been unlocked, but that was normal for them. The front door had been locked. Christy Woods could be heard in the background, crying, saying she did not know where her daughter was. Kimry asked if the dispatcher could hear him. The line was cutting in and out. He repeated the address. He repeated that Mariah was missing. The dispatcher told him to stay at the residence. To keep searching. To call back immediately if she was found. Kimry said he would. And then the call ended. Deputy Thomas Marshburn and Detective Kenny Sema of the Onslow County Sheriff's Office arrived at the residence at approximately 6:48 that morning. The scene they encountered was quiet. Almost eerily so. A blue van sat in the driveway. Marshburn immediately noticed something odd. The van had no frost or ice on it, despite the fact that it was a cold November morning in North Carolina. Frost covered the grass. Ice clung to the windows of nearby vehicles. But the van was clear. It had been driven recently. Inside the mobile home, Christy Woods stood in the living room, her 2 sons beside her, tears streaming down her face. She told deputies that she had put Mariah to bed the night before around 8:30. That when she woke up that morning, she found her sons safe in their rooms, but Mariah was gone. The back door of the home had been unlocked. That was not unusual, she said. They rarely locked it. But the front door had been secured. She mentioned that during the night, the power had flickered. She had woken up at some point and noticed the lights blinking on and off. In the morning, she found the breaker panel in the laundry room near the back door standing open. Kimry, she said, had reset the breaker. Deputy Marshburn walked through the narrow hallway to Mariah's bedroom. The room was small and sparsely furnished. A single mattress lay on the floor in the corner. In the center of the room, placed neatly on the floor, was a pink onesie pajama set. There were no signs of struggle. No indication that the child had been forcibly removed. The room was undisturbed. Marshburn asked Christy Woods for permission to search the home. She agreed. Deputies checked every room, every closet, under every piece of furniture. They searched the yard. They called Mariah's name. There was no response. Mariah Woods was gone. While Deputy Marshburn conducted the initial search, Detective Seema spoke with Earl Kimry in the backyard. Kimry repeated much of what he had told the 911 dispatcher: the late-night video games, the trips to the friendly mart and the abandoned house to steal furniture. Detective Seema asked Kimry if he would be willing to come to the Onslow County Sheriff's Office for a formal interview. Kimry agreed. He was not under arrest. He was not in custody. He rode voluntarily in the back of a patrol car to the sheriff's office, leaving Christy Woods and the two boys at the residence. At the sheriff's office, Kimry was interviewed by Lieutenant Linwood Foy of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. The interview began around 8:10 in the morning. Lieutenant Foy asked Kimry to provide background information and walk through the previous night's events. Kimry's account was detailed. The family had driven to Richlands to visit his mother. They had stopped at Walmart on the way home to buy groceries. They arrived back at the residence around 6:30 in the evening. The children had been fed and put to bed by 8:30. While everyone else slept, he stayed up playing video games. Around 11 o'clock, he drove to the friendly mart but did not buy anything. He then drove to the abandoned house on High Hill Road, loaded 2 dressers into his van, and returned home around midnight. He sat back down and played video games for another hour or two, then left the house again on foot and walked to the abandoned house. He spent about 30 minutes there, then walked back home, arriving around 3 or 3:30 in the morning. When he returned, the front door was locked. He sat in his recliner and played video games, possibly dozing off at some point. Then the alarm went off at 6:12 in the morning. That was when he noticed Mariah was missing. Lieutenant Foy asked directly, did he know where Mariah was? Kimry said he did not. Had he harmed her? Kimry said no. He began to cry. He said he loved that little girl with all his heart. That she had called him daddy. That he had known her since she was 9 months old. At 9:38 that morning, the interview ended. Kimry was driven back to his residence. He was still not under arrest. But investigators were not convinced. The story Kimry had told, while detailed, did not add up. Why would someone leave their home twice in the middle of the night to steal furniture from an abandoned house when a 3-year-old child was missing the next morning? Why were the pajamas Mariah had been wearing left on the floor beside her bed? Why had the van shown no signs of frost or ice when every other vehicle in the area was covered? And most troubling of all, why had Earl Kimry seemed so calm? Within hours of Mariah's disappearance being reported, the case was classified as a child abduction. An Amber Alert was issued statewide. Mariah's face appeared on television screens, billboards, and social media feeds across North Carolina. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was contacted. The Federal Bureau of Investigation deployed resources, including agents, forensic teams, and aviation assets. The community of Onslow County rallied. Over 700 volunteers joined law enforcement in searching for Mariah. They combed through woods, fields, and abandoned properties. They knocked on doors. They distributed flyers. Marine Corps helicopters from nearby Camp Lejeune flew low over the trees, searching from above. Cadaver dogs were deployed. Dive teams entered creeks, ponds, and drainage ditches. And at the center of it all was Christy Woods, Mariah's mother, standing in front of news cameras, her voice breaking, her hands trembling, begging whoever had taken her daughter to bring her home. "She's my everything," Christy said through tears. "She's my baby. Please, if you have her, bring her back. Safe and sound. I'll do anything. Just bring her home." But as the hours turned into days, the tone of the investigation began to shift. On November 28, 2017, one day after Mariah was reported missing, both Christy Woods and Earl Kimry were brought in for polygraph examinations administered by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Christy Woods went first. She was asked a series of questions about the night Mariah disappeared. Did she know where her daughter was? Had she harmed her? Was she involved in her disappearance? Christy's answers were consistent with her previous statements. She said she did not know where Mariah was. That she had put her to bed around 8:30. That she had gone to bed herself around 11 o'clock after texting a friend at 10:59 p.m. That she woke up during the night because the power was flickering. That in the morning, Mariah was gone. The polygraph examiner reviewed the results. Christy Woods showed no signs of deception. She passed. Earl Kimry was next. He was asked the same types of questions. Did he know where Mariah was? Had he harmed her? Was he involved in her disappearance? Kimry repeated the story he had told investigators: the late-night video games, the trips to the friendly mart and the abandoned house to steal furniture, discovering her missing in the morning. The polygraph examiner reviewed the results. Earl Kimry showed signs of deception. He failed. After the polygraph, Kimry was interviewed again by the FBI. This time, the questions were more pointed. Agents asked him to clarify his timeline. They pressed him about the trips to the abandoned house. They asked about the furniture. And then they asked about something new, the purchases he had made on the night Mariah disappeared. Kimry hesitated. Then he admitted that on the night of November 26, after leaving the friendly mart, he had also stopped at a Family Dollar store on Highway 53. There, he said, he had purchased several items: a flashlight, bleach, nail polish remover, which contains acetone, a headlamp, zip ties, a padlock, and a Nerf gun. He said the Nerf gun was for the children. He said he needed the flashlight and headlamp because he was going to the abandoned house in the dark. He said he spent about $20. But he did not explain why he needed bleach, acetone, and zip ties to steal furniture. Investigators took note. Those were not items someone would typically purchase for a furniture theft. Those were items someone might use to clean up a crime scene. To dispose of evidence. To secure something, or someone. The pieces were starting to come together. But they still did not have Mariah. On November 29, investigators obtained a search warrant for a storage locker at Kimry's residence. Inside, they found a bottle of nail polish remover containing acetone. They also found empty bottles of bleach. On the same day, crime scene investigators were dispatched to the abandoned house on High Hill Road, the location Kimry claimed he had visited twice on the night Mariah disappeared. Lieutenant David Evans of the Onslow County Sheriff's Office led the team. Inside the house, they found exactly what Kimry had described. There were dressers. There were magazines, some of them adult-oriented. There were black tote boxes. And on a love seat in the den, they noticed something significant. One of the cushions was missing. The love seat had 2 cushions. But only one remained. The other, a light-colored cushion with an orange and yellow plaid cover, was gone. Investigators photographed the scene. They noted the missing cushion. They catalogued the items in the house. And they continued searching. Meanwhile, the search for Mariah intensified. Dive teams entered Southwest Creek near Highway 17. They searched Shaw Highway near Highway 53. They dragged rivers. They searched drainage ditches. Crime scene investigators were sent to a local landfill, where they sorted through 95,000 pounds of trash that had been collected from the area in the days following Mariah's disappearance. But there was no sign of the little girl. On December 1, 2017, at approximately 8:30 in the evening, Lieutenant Linwood Foy received a phone call that would change everything. The call came from Debbie Kimry, Earl Kimry's mother. She told Lieutenant Foy that her son wanted to speak with investigators. That he was very upset. That he wanted to talk about the case. Lieutenant Foy and Major Thomas of the Onslow County Sheriff's Office immediately drove to retrieve Earl Kimry. They transported him to the sheriff's office, arriving around 10 o'clock that night. Kimry was brought into an interview room. Lieutenant Foy sat across from him. And at 10:13 p.m., Earl Kimry began to speak. "I messed up my life," he said. Lieutenant Foy leaned forward. He asked Kimry what he meant. And then, slowly, haltingly, Earl Kimry told the truth. He said that when he returned to the mobile home on the night of November 26, after his first trip to the abandoned house, he found Mariah lying face down on her bed. He turned her over. Her skin was blue. She had no pulse. He tried to perform CPR. He wanted her to start breathing again. But she did not. Lieutenant Foy asked Kimry where Mariah was now. Kimry looked down at the table. "She's on Shaw Highway. In Begal." He said he would not take investigators to the exact location, but he would show them on a map. He pulled up a Google map on a computer in the interview room and pointed to a bridge on Shaw Highway, near the intersection with Highway 53 in Pender County. He said Mariah was in the water. In the middle of the bridge. Under the surface. She was wrapped in 3 trash bags. He had tied the bags around her neck. He had placed a 50-pound block of concrete inside with her to weigh her down. It was his fault. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. On the morning of December 2, 2017, law enforcement agencies from across the region converged on Shaw Highway in Pender County, North Carolina. The bridge Earl Kimry had indicated was a small, 28-foot structure spanning a shallow creek in a rural, wooded area south of Jacksonville. The water below was cold, murky, and slow-moving. Dive teams from the Onslow County Sheriff's Office, the Pender County Sheriff's Office, and the Fayetteville Police Department Urban Search and Rescue Unit entered the water. They were equipped with sonar equipment, underwater cameras, and recovery gear. The creek was approximately 18 feet deep at its deepest point. Visibility was nearly zero. The Onslow County Sheriff, Hans Miller, stood on the bank with investigators from the FBI and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. The district attorney from Pender County was present. So was the Pender County Sheriff. News crews had gathered on the road above, their cameras trained on the water below. The search began in the early morning hours. Divers moved methodically, sweeping the creek bed, feeling through the mud and silt with their hands. The current was slow, but the cold was biting. They worked in shifts, rotating in and out of the water every 30 minutes to avoid hypothermia. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky. And then, at 5:05 in the evening, one of the divers surfaced. He was holding something. The dive team brought the object to the surface and carefully transported it by boat to a small dock on the creek bank. Lieutenant David Evans of the Onslow County Sheriff's Office approached. He knelt beside the recovery bag and slowly unzipped it. Inside was a cushion cover. Orange and yellow plaid. The same color and pattern as the missing cushion from the love seat at the abandoned house on High Hill Road. Lieutenant Evans carefully opened the cushion cover. Inside was a large, irregularly shaped piece of concrete, the kind broken during road construction projects. High Hill Road, investigators knew, had been under construction in recent weeks. And wrapped inside the cushion cover, secured with a white trash bag tied tightly at the top, was the body of Mariah Woods. She was not wearing any clothing. Her small body had been completely encased in 3 layers of trash bags. The bags were tied around her neck. Her hands and feet showed severe immersion changes from being submerged in water for nearly a week. The distance from the mobile home at 2405 Dawson Cabin Road to the bridge on Shaw Highway was measured by investigators. It came to exactly 22.4 miles. Earl Kimry had driven Mariah's body 22 miles in the middle of the night, weighted it down with concrete, and sunk it in 18 feet of water. And then he had come home, sat down in his recliner, and called 911 to report her missing. Mariah's body was transported to the Brody School of Medicine at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina. There, Dr. Karen Kelly, a forensic pathologist, conducted a full autopsy. The findings were as heartbreaking as they were damning. Mariah had faint bruises on the left side of her face. A bruise on her upper left eyelid. An abrasion over the bridge of her nose. An abrasion beneath her chin. An abrasion on her upper lip. Her scalp showed small hemorrhages, 2 to 3 inches in length, but there was no evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull. Her brain was swollen, consistent with oxygen deprivation, but there were no signs of a skull fracture or severe head injury. Her hands and feet showed marked immersion changes, wrinkling and discoloration consistent with being submerged in water for an extended period. But it was the toxicology report that revealed the true cause of death. Mariah Woods had died of chloroform toxicity. Chloroform is a volatile chemical compound that was once used as an anesthetic in medical procedures. It is a colorless liquid with a sweet odor. When inhaled or ingested in sufficient quantities, it can cause unconsciousness, respiratory failure, cardiac arrest, and death. It has been largely discontinued in medical use due to its and the availability of safer alternatives. Chloroform can be created through a chemical reaction between bleach and acetone, the exact two substances Earl Kimry had purchased at the Family Dollar store on the night Mariah disappeared. Dr. Kelly could not definitively determine whether the bruises and abrasions on Mariah's face and scalp had been inflicted before or after her death. It was possible that some of the injuries had occurred during the process of moving her body, wrapping it in trash bags, or placing it into the cushion cover. But the presence of chloroform in Mariah's system left no doubt about the cause of death. Mariah Woods had been poisoned. On January 24, 2018, after consulting with the district attorney, Lieutenant Linwood Foy charged Earl Kimry with first-degree murder and felony child abuse inflicting serious bodily injury. The state of North Carolina announced its intention to seek the death penalty. Kimry was indicted by an Onslow County grand jury on February 13, 2018. The case was classified as capital murder due to the aggravating circumstance of the victim's age. Mariah was only 3 years old. Under North Carolina law, the murder of a child under the age of 12 during the commission of a felony is an automatic capital offense. Kimry was assigned 2 public defenders and arraigned in court, where he pleaded not guilty to all charges. For the next 4 years, the case moved slowly through the North Carolina court system. Delays mounted, some procedural, others due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which brought jury trials across the state to a halt for over a year. Trial dates were set and then pushed back. March 21, 2022, was scheduled as the next trial date. Prosecutors prepared their case. Witnesses were subpoenaed. Evidence was organized. But on March 21, 2022, something unexpected happened. Earl Kimry appeared in court, not for a trial, but for a change of plea hearing. The courtroom was packed. Members of Mariah's family sat in the front rows. Investigators who had worked the case for years, Lieutenant Linwood Foy, Detective Kenny Sema, Lieutenant David Evans, crime scene investigators, filled the benches. The district attorney, Ernie Lee, sat at the prosecution table with his team. Kimry was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. He wore a standard-issue jail uniform. He sat between his 2 public defenders. The judge called the case and outlined the charges: first-degree murder, felony child abuse inflicting serious bodily injury, obstruction of justice, concealing the death of a child, breaking and entering, and possession of stolen goods. The judge confirmed that Kimry understood the charges, that his attorneys had explained the nature of the charges and possible penalties, and that first-degree murder in North Carolina is punishable by death or life in prison without the possibility of parole. Then came the critical moment. The judge asked, "How does the defendant plead?" Kimry's attorney stood and announced that after extensive consultation, the defense was withdrawing the not guilty plea. The defendant wished to plead guilty to first-degree murder. There was a murmur in the courtroom. The judge asked for silence. The district attorney explained that in exchange for the defendant's guilty plea, the state of North Carolina had agreed not to pursue the death penalty. The agreed-upon sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge asked Earl Kimry to stand and confirm, in his own words, that he was pleading guilty. Kimry's voice was quiet. "I'm deeply sorry for the pain I have caused. I hope that by coming here today and accepting responsibility, the family can begin to heal. This was not my intention." The judge asked again, "Do you plead guilty to first-degree murder?" "Yes, sir," Kimry said. The judge accepted the plea and sentenced Earl Kimry to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There would be no trial. No appeals. No further court appearances. It was over. During the sentencing hearing, members of Mariah's family were given the opportunity to address the court. Christy Woods, Mariah's mother, stood at the podium. Her hands gripped the edges of the wood. Her voice shook as she read from a prepared statement. "My family and I will never be the same. Something will always be missing, and that something is my baby girl. We have not been able to grieve properly. My sons have been tortured by this. They fade away a little more each day. And to this day, they still can't understand why." She paused, wiping tears from her face. "All of the milestones we should have experienced with her, we will never experience. Her first day of school. Her first date. Her first crush. Graduation day. All of her firsts were taken away." She looked up at the judge. "I am now a broken person, just trying to get through the days. But she will be honored forever. She will be remembered. She existed. She mattered." She turned slightly, looking toward the defense table where Earl Kimry sat with his head down. "I want to know why. But I also know we will never know." She stepped back from the podium and sat down. The courtroom was silent. The judge addressed the courtroom, acknowledging the tragedy of the case. He explained that while the guilty plea could not bring closure to the family, it would at least spare them the ordeal of a lengthy trial and the uncertainty of appeals. He turned to Christy Woods and her family. "You will not have to come back to court for this case. There will be no appeals. There will be no parole hearings. Life without parole in North Carolina means exactly that. Earl Kimry will spend the rest of his natural life in prison. He will never be released." He then turned to Kimry. "Stand up, Mr. Kimry." Kimry stood. The judge read the sentence into the record: life in prison without the possibility of parole on the charge of first-degree murder, with all other charges consolidated under the same sentence. The judge struck his gavel. "This case is concluded." Earl Kimry was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. He did not look back. In the days and weeks following the sentencing, investigators pieced together what they believed had happened on the night of November 26, 2017. Based on the evidence, the timeline, the purchases, the toxicology report, the location of Mariah's body, they concluded the following. At some point after the family returned home from their trip to Richlands, Earl Kimry used a chemical mixture of bleach and acetone to create chloroform. The exact method is not publicly known, but the presence of both chemicals in his possession, purchased on the night Mariah disappeared, combined with the toxicology findings, strongly suggest this is what occurred. Investigators believe that Kimry administered the chloroform to Mariah while she was in her bedroom. Whether he intended to kill her or merely sedate her is unknown. What is known is that Mariah died from chloroform toxicity. After Mariah died, Kimry removed her pajamas and placed them on the floor beside her bed, likely in an attempt to stage the scene to look as though she had wandered off on her own. He then wrapped Mariah's body in 3 trash bags, tying them tightly around her neck. He placed her body inside the orange and yellow plaid cushion cover that he had taken from the love seat at the abandoned house on High Hill Road. He then placed a large piece of concrete, likely taken from the road construction site on High Hill Road, inside the cushion with her body to weigh it down. At some point in the early morning hours of November 27, Kimry drove Mariah's body 22 miles to the bridge on Shaw Highway in Pender County. He threw her body into the creek, where it sank to a depth of 18 feet. He then drove back home, sat down in his recliner, and waited until morning to call 911. For 4 days, he maintained his innocence. He told investigators he had no idea what happened to Mariah. He claimed he had been at an abandoned house stealing furniture. He failed a polygraph. He gave inconsistent statements. And then, when the weight of the evidence became too much to bear, he confessed. The question that haunts this case, the question that Christy Woods asked in her victim impact statement, is why? Why would Earl Kimry, a man who had known Mariah since she was 9 months old, a man she called daddy, a man who by all accounts had a relationship with her, why would he kill her? Investigators do not have a definitive answer. Kimry has never provided one. His statement in court, that "this was not my intention," suggests that perhaps he did not intend to kill Mariah. Perhaps he intended only to sedate her. Perhaps something went wrong. Perhaps the dosage was too high. Perhaps he panicked. But the evidence suggests premeditation. The purchase of bleach and acetone. The removal of her pajamas. The wrapping of her body in multiple layers of trash bags. The use of a cushion and concrete to weigh her down. The drive to a remote creek in the middle of the night. These are not the actions of someone who panicked. These are the actions of someone who was trying to cover up a crime. There is another possibility, one that investigators have considered but cannot prove. Court documents filed by Mariah's biological father, Alex Woods, in 2016 raised concerns about the safety of his children in Christy Woods' home. Those concerns were not acted upon. But they raised the question, was there something happening in that home that no one knew about? Was Mariah being abused? Was Earl Kimry trying to silence her? We do not know. And we may never know. What we do know is that Mariah Woods was 3 years old. She was innocent. She was vulnerable. She was the little girl who danced when music played and laughed at her own jokes. She trusted the people around her. And one of those people took her life. Mariah Kay Woods is buried in Onslow County, North Carolina. Her grave is marked with a small headstone. Her mother visits regularly. So do members of her extended family. In the years since her death, Christy Woods has spoken publicly about her grief. She has said that she will never fully heal. That a part of her died with Mariah. That she struggles every day with guilt that she did not see the signs, that she did not protect her daughter, that she allowed Earl Kimry into their lives. She has also said that she wants Mariah to be remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived. As a joyful, loving child. As a little girl who brought light into every room she entered. Mariah's 2 brothers, now older, continue to live with their mother. They have been in therapy. They have struggled to understand what happened to their sister. But they are survivors. And they carry Mariah's memory with them. Earl Kimry is currently incarcerated in a North Carolina state prison. He will spend the rest of his life there. He will never be eligible for parole. He will never walk free. And Mariah Woods, 3 years old, with brown hair and blue eyes, who loved to dance and laugh and make people smile, will never be forgotten. This case is a reminder that evil can exist in the most familiar places. That trust can be betrayed. That the people we think we know best can be hiding unimaginable darkness. But it is also a reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will eventually surface. That investigators will not stop searching. That communities will rally. That families will fight for justice. For days of lies. One moment of truth. One precious life stolen. But Mariah's story lives on, in the memories of those who loved her, in the dedication of those who searched for her, and in the justice that was finally served. If Mariah's story moved you, if you believe cases like hers deserve to be told and remembered, then please subscribe to Cold Case Beacon. We're dedicated to bringing you detailed, thoroughly researched true crime documentaries about cases that demand attention and refuse to be forgotten. Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Tell me what cases you want to see covered next. And please share this video so that Mariah's story reaches as many people as possible. Together, we can make sure these stories are never lost, that victims like Mariah are never forgotten, and that justice, no matter how long it takes, is always served. Thank you for watching. Until the next case, stay vigilant, stay informed, and never stop searching for the truth.